Harnessing creative collaboration at scale has countless benefits for business, society, and communities. In this episode, I speak to Lesley Williams, the CEO of Tshimologong Precinct and an inclusive innovation practitioner who has been at it for over 2 decades.
The thing is, like-minded people working together don't always transform systems or make a shift. And like-minded people often have a common agenda, so, it's easier. But when you are looking at transformative change, you often need to bring people on board that you're not always likely to work with.
When done well, creative collaboration can have a transformative impact on business, society, and communities. If you are interested in learning more about creative collaboration and how to make it happen in your own community, keep listening. Don't miss out on the latest insights. Subscribe to The Lead Creative wherever you get your podcasts. Welcome to the Lead Creative Podcast, where we talk to creative industry leaders, influencers, and brands. We discuss the strategies that influence brand thinking and shape industries. Thought leaders and heads of agencies let us in on some of their thinking and insights. I'm your host, Tshimologong Precinct. Enjoy the show, and please share and subscribe. Lesley, thank you so much for making time to talk to us after so long. What a pleasure.
Mongezi, my brother, my fellow loud laugher, always awesome to see you. Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. Lesley, let's start here. I mean, over the course of nearly 2 decades that I've been following your work, you've been instrumental in enabling creative collaboration, whether this was at the Impact Hub or today at Tshimologong. What are some of the dynamics involved in getting strangers to collaborate and build lasting solutions for society?
Sure. I think one of the things we often forget is that when we start a project, a venture, a movement, we often need to engage people with 3 capacities. The head, which is the intellect, the stuff of getting things done, the pragmatic things. The heart, and it's really the heart that drives the passion before you get them to actually use their hands to get to work. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen is that when you truly listen to people and where they're at, you invite them from that point of view. You find that connective tissue that binds what you want to do, what they want to do. And sometimes we see a common opportunity or common problem. Right. So we don't go at people with some sort of value proposition to bring them on board. It really starts with that purely simple human capacity to listen and approach people with an invitation.
So one of the things that I've always admired and followed about your work, I think from the days of, Impact Hub and today at Tshimologong, is this idea of being able to get strangers into a room with a problem, whether that is a problem that society is facing, whether that is a problem that, I suppose, business is facing. You are able to get people into rooms and get them to collaborate and create solutions at scale. Some of these solutions, of course, become big things, and some of these solutions kind of fall by the wayside. Can you talk us through, first of all, how you get these kinds of people who don't know you and don't know each other to collaborate, but also what makes the successful ideas successful out of the ones that come out of those spaces?
Sure. So I often, when one invites people to a space or to an event or to an initiative, the experience of the contribution starts with the invitation. And quite often, I'm not the subject matter expert in society on whatever topic, be it energy crisis or xenophobia, which I was usually involved in. I'm not the subject matter expert. I often see something, and sometimes I have a hunch. What I'm really good at is coffee dates. I love meeting up and having coffees with people. So I kind of look at who is that next person that's interested in something and particular angle, and they may have some sort of richness to contribute to the discussion. And I just literally get insights. And sometimes I set myself a target, and I may just say I'm going to chat to 5 or 10 people. and ask them who else should I speak to. So there's a bit of lobbying happening, if you like, behind the scenes. So you're really connecting with people and finding that common thread. At that point, people already feel like they have a sense of responsibility
Sure.
to make a contribution. So by the time an invitation goes out, number one, it needs to be framed in a compelling manner. And often that compelling manner will be shaped through the dialogues we've had with people before the actual invitation goes out. Because then you know you're not just speaking from your own brain fart, if you like, from your own set of assumptions, but you've kind of tested and validated some of the thinking. And like I say, you don't have to have it perfectly. It just needs to be compelling enough, and I think true enough. People know when they're speaking or connecting with others who are authentic. And they understand who are just hopping onto something because it's a trend that's going to pass by. And when inviting people, I often, ask people to really think about what is their role in this, like what is their contribution. And it's twofold, like what can you give and what are you seeking to receive
Right.
from this moment together. Because I think, when we start networks or innovation hubs, especially networks, people sign up to networks and say, oh, that network was useless, and then they leave and hop on to the next thing. But if they feel like there's an actual role to contribute and a place, and they're seen in these places, they tend to take shared responsibility in keeping it activated.
There are a lot of things there, and a lot of them go back to the ever famous modesty with which you operate at times. Like, because there's the one which is connecting the dots among people, talking to people and connecting those dots and connecting the people, which is an absolutely great thing. There's also something else that I see you do beyond connecting the dots and bringing subject matter experts, which is I guess the big problem that you're seeking to solve, because there's something in that makes you see the problem, follow it through, get people into a room to build a solution in a way that other people don't, and then connecting the kind of right people to come up with solutions and to come up with those creative ideas and creative innovations. What are some of the things that you see in some of the people that you talk to that that John, Jack, and Candice will work to kind of come up, that this will be a great combination of strangers to come up with a creative solution, because that in itself is a skill that very many people haven't got.
Yeah. You know, it's often easier to onboard somebody who's like-minded.
Sure.
But the thing is, like-minded people working together don't always transform systems or make a shift. And like-minded people often have a common agenda, so it's easier. But when you are looking at transformative change, you often need to bring people on board that you're not always likely to work with. And a couple of years ago, Impact Hub used to have an annual global conference called Unlikely Allies. That really, really challenged me to really look at where and how do I collaborate with people I don't necessarily like
Yeah.
or want to be around, but actually we need that diverse voice at the table to get something through. So when kind of connecting the dots, I always look at like what is enough for us to get started. Because sometimes people may not agree on the 10-step plan, but you may get them to agree on the first step.
Yes.
And then we experience that first step together. And what I often like doing is reflecting or holding a mirror to what are the actions and insights that came up. So kind of like surface the feedback,
Yes.
reflect on the feedback, and then act again. And that can go like really fast when people really had an amazing time. Then they go to the others. But when there is still some resistance, one needs to almost surface the learning and surface the insight, make that super visible. And that's where, as a facilitator, I draw on that skill, getting people in a room, having a conversation, surface the commonalities and the insights, but also name the elephants, when we were speaking earlier about authenticity and being fake.
Yes.
people really get annoyed when you don't name the elephant. Because we
Right.
all know it. We see it, we hear it. Go into the conflict.
Yes.
We don't always have to necessarily resolve it right there, but name the differences that we have in the room in order to get into that action. Because if people feel like they're forced to come along, especially when their job sent them to be part of some innovation space or
Yeah.
hackathon or whatever, they will be resistant and they won't give their all. They'll give enough just to show up so they can tick the attendance register. But when you listen and you speak to what their challenges and frustrations are and the opportunity from their agenda perspective, then they're like, oh, okay, I feel included I feel identified
Yeah.
in what
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
naming or framing.
There's something I'd like to pick up on from what you've just mentioned, and this is this idea of taking taking an agenda item or taking a thing or a discussion point and moving with that particular discussion point and going on to the next one and building it brick by brick, step by step, level by level. At times, I'm assuming that that would almost change the direction of where you wanted to go in the first place, especially if you see it at those kind of steps and levels, right? You can think we're going east, but actually we end up going south. We end up going to a different solution because of these steps, because of these different iterations. How do you then take on this idea or this notion that we might actually end up at a different place completely with a creative innovation or with an idea?
It's so rough because we all have our thing that we really, really want to see. And as humans, we don't like compromising. And, there needs to be some level of openness. And openness is a practice, it doesn't come overnight. So for me, as a practitioner of you said it earlier on, inclusive innovation, a practitioner of facilitation and moderation, I need to constantly practice.
Sure.
And I know sometimes I've had to walk away from something where I felt that openness was not met. If you're in a 3-day process and people are ideating and coming on, putting amazing things in the pot, but if people leave with the same agenda that they came with and they're really pushing their idea and didn't allow the richness to enter into the idea, they fixated. Sometimes there is a walk away point.
Right.
And that is okay. In fact, I had an experience of walking away from something I was part of in Cairo a few months ago. And a few of the stakeholders at that meeting came to Tshimologong last week.
Yes.
And then they saw what I was speaking about. And they're like, oh gosh, now I want to collaborate. And when I interrogated with one of the people was open to telling me, he said, look, other networks have framed what you framing now to me.
Yes.
And I said, yes, I'm excited. And when I showed up, I realized they're using the same language as you, but they didn't mean it. It didn't have that substance behind it. So the person came in reluctantly initially to me in terms of collaborating. Now they're all in. They're like, let's do this. There's plans to sign something by September.
Right.
And, I think we forget that when we meet people in a room or in a conversation, that they're coming with baggage, with a past life beyond that moment when you interacted with them.
Yes.
So I think for me, it's very important almost to surface like, what is the no? People name it, they have an off-ramp opportunity. Find out like, what is the constraints? Because I think I don't want to say we're fluffy, but sometimes we go to optimism and only speak about what is possible. But we also need to find out like, what are your constraints? And also find out what do you need in order to come along?
Right.
What is that critical thing that you need to see us bring into this?
Now, one of the instances at which these kinds of things or these kinds of collaborative ideas, call them hackathons, call them collaborative, I suppose innovation or whatever it is, right? One of the things that happens with them is a failure of innovating, of rather implementing, right? So we come together, have this hackathon, have this thing, but implementation kind of falls flat. What in your view enables these collaborations to reach implementation stage, to reach a stage where we don't just implement, but we actually make things better for society? I know that you do these kinds of things a lot with Tshimologong. One of the ones that comes to mind for me is your the initiative that's called Fagugesi, I think that you do with Tshimologong. And it's one of those kinds of things where people come together, they innovate, and then they implement, and the implementation goes to a certain level to change society for the better. What makes those ones, the ones that are successful? Like, what makes that implementation work?
I think those of us who are hosts of hackathons and game jams, etc., we need to be very clear about what we're inviting people into. And I don't think we clear ourselves enough about the objective often. There is the hype factor. But if you want to get serious developers and serious contributors that are going to contribute to something in the long term, we need to frame it clearly. You need subject matter experts up front. There needs to be teachable moments of exposure for people. And we also need to realize if you are planning a hackathon with people who are meeting each other for the first time, they need to go through their own team formation process. So, old school would say forming, storming, norming, and performing.
Yeah.
Now, in that hackathon weekend, you've only formed and stormed. You haven't really learned how to work together. You haven't learned to gel as a team. Business partners are very hard to come for. So for me, these sort of open-ended hackathons, I like it for ideation when we're coming to create new ideas. And maybe corporates like these hackathons because their teams are the ones to take the idea forward. So when you're inviting people to that sort of hackathon, for me, we need to be transparent and say, like, we want to either work with these teams or we will adopt the ideas and reverse engineer the solutions into our corporate. For me, the hackathons that really convert and make a difference is when teams apply.
Right.
People who have an existing relationship, or at least a few other people in the room, and you may meet a new business partner or new a crowd you want to collaborate with or have a joint venture on, and then decide. So within the Fakugezi Festival context, with our animation jam, that is really a big challenge for animators to see, can they draw super fast and create a product from start to finish within 48 hours.
Right.
We also use that for talent identification. So we actively invite people to apply to Academy. With the game jam, it's typically teams that apply, and the winning prize is that we incubate them and we build a business with them for the year thereafter.
Right.
So that's what I'm saying, like there needs to be a super clear objective for it to be successful.
Then my next question with that, I mean, you've partly answered it, but my next question on that is this idea of ownership, because a lot of the time, some of these types of concepts suffer from this idea of ownership, where if I've contributed to an idea or a concept, whether you've been open and transparent about the fact that you're going to use this or about the fact that you want to use it somewhere else, some people at least tend to want to partly own or co-own or in some ways have some kind of stake in that particular idea, whether it was collaborative with strangers or whatever the case is. How do you address those kinds of challenges?
There's various ways I can respond to this. The one is read the T's and C's that you're being invited to, and ask the hosts of the hackathons, like, what up? Do we keep our idea? Do you guys become the owners of it? Do we evolve it? We've had that situation with, in fact, like one of a short animation came out of a hackathon a few years ago. It's gone on to win international awards and features in international film festivals. And Jeannie Vati, who was the main person behind the idea, thank goodness she worked with Tshimologong, and now we're trying to make it into a feature film. But the initial team that worked on it, decided to pull away. But also at that time, Tshimologong was, clear the owner. And what we've learned as Tshimologong itself is to really train people far more about what does commission work look like. What is, again, being super explicit about what's the why behind the hackathon and where ownership lies. We also have issues, not necessarily with Tshimologong, but I've seen this at Impact Hub and other spaces where some people overestimate how much they contributed to an idea.
Always the
And
case.
other team members will say that was a lazy ass. He like hopped in and out, contributed, but wasn't the actual builder, the
Yeah,
one sitting overnight.
sure.
So for me, this is where my preference comes working with teams because it's super clear. But like I say, literally read the T's and C's.
Hmm.
I think, for me, it's been in this innovation, well, like you say, for almost 2 decades. It's scary, 2 decades, oh my word. Uh, it is important to look at IP. And
Yes.
yet, the people who develop something excellently
Hmm.
are the ones that take the idea to life.
Right.
Quite often, the people who are IP first, they're even afraid to test their idea in the market. So, and even outside of hackathons, people have an idea, you go to launch, and then you wonder why 6 months later or 2 years later you burn so much money and you don't have a product or people haven't adopted your product.
Hmm.
You need to have some level of openness, even if you ask people to, like NDAs, that is an option with I would say use those for corporates. But if you want to get insight into whether you have a workable idea, you
Yes.
need to share it.
If you're enjoying The Lead Creative, please share this episode with your network and hit follow or subscribe. Enjoy the show. That for me is one of the places that I guess individual creatives kind of struggle in sharing their ideas and also in finding other like-minded people to work with, to collaborate with, to build with. What are some of your thoughts on how these individual creatives can do that, can find their kin, if you will, and also test their ideas in a safe space?
So there are two extremes, I think, at bay. There is the one hand of like, don't worry about the IP, just go and create. And then there's the flip, understand your value of what you're creating. And I think we need to find the balance. I don't think creatives in South Africa understand, and not only South Africa, it is a problem in the creative industries. There isn't sufficient knowledge and understanding of the business side of creativity.
Sure.
And that is one thing that I'm obsessed with at the moment, especially within the digital creative industries. Understand the value so you can have mature conversations. I know a lot of creatives that have sold incredible creations to international studios for a pittance.
Right.
And I think, if you cannot afford to get a team, other intermediaries, distributors, etc., into your core team or salespeople, for me, that is the importance of hubs.
Yes.
To really understand you, guide you, work with you, build the venture as a business.
Right.
Quite often, creatives want to be the creator, but then you need to work with producers or other people who have that competency.
Just to go to a bit of an extreme of a conversation that I've had with other people who come from the opposite end of the scale, who would say, I see ideas all the time. Ideas are free. Ideas are kind of everywhere, right? Now, with that in mind, how do creatives then add value to some of these ideas? Add value. You mentioned the business side, which is very important, and this is part of it. But how do I add value to my ideas, to my concepts, so that they become viable as a business or even as something that I can sell to a studio, to somebody else that can take it forward?
I think, and that's not an easy answer, but early on I spoke about spending time with like-minded people,
Sure.
or maybe with
Unlikely allies.
unlikely allies,
Yes.
unlikely allies. This is where we really need to expose ourselves to other contexts that we're not used to. It's very rare that you find a creative at a business school, executive education workshop, or finance masterclass, or policy dialogue. Creatives often want to create, and I think for me, it's that stretch goal. Like, what is that almost like 20% stretch you're willing to give yourself to understand the other side of it? I'm not sure if I'm answering the question, but I think like exposure to different contexts is super important. There aren't copy and paste solutions to your businesses. But there are certain frameworks you can draw from. I mean, business model canvas has been around for a minute. And I'm in the next 2 weeks running a business model canvas workshop with our animation studio at work. And what I am starting to notice is that if you like, mainstream business or tech entrepreneurs and creatives are dealing with the same issue, but we call it different things.
Right.
So quite often in the creative industries, we speak about audience development.
Yes.
And in the pure tech entrepreneur world, we speak about customer acquisition.
Yes.
Customer acquisition, or it's the same thing but different language. So we need to be a bit more agile and just start looking at where and how can we learn from others without assuming that we are from a different world, they don't get it.
Exactly. Yeah.
This morning in my team meeting, we saw again, creatives were speaking about their pitch Bible, and our tech team was speaking about their deal book. It's the same thing. So just like being open to listen, and then you can see, get some insights about where and how you can package your work and see your work as a product that needs to go to market. I know sometimes that's seen as dirty language, and I've been called a capitalist in the music industry. I'm like, guys, you're speaking about sustainable livelihoods, and I'm saying entrepreneurship is a mechanism for sustainable livelihood. We're saying the same thing. We've got the same agenda.
Yes.
We're naming it differently.
Right.
But expose yourself to these environments.
I see you as an evangelist for inclusive innovation, and you talk about inclusive innovation a lot. Can you describe what it is and how this manifests itself in society?
I think for me right now, a lot of my current agenda, and it's probably an agenda for a while, around inclusive innovation, specifically about socioeconomic inclusion. We also do a lot in gender inclusion at Tshimologong, but I want to speak about socioeconomic for a minute.
Sure.
I get frustrated when I see wasted talent, if you like. And quite often we look at someone and we make these assumptions because they don't come from the right pedigree, if you like. So people with access keep getting more and more opportunities. And when I look at, just to give an example, something like animation.
Yes.
Before you go digital, you need to learn how to draw. How many of our kids in townships, in rural, are sketching away?
Yes.
And they're masters at that talent, but they don't have that stepping stone to go to the next level.
Right.
Now, right now, and again, I'm speaking about animation just because part of my master's dissertation is looking at the influence of cultural diplomacy in South Africa's animation industry.
Yeah.
And I am saying there's such high demand globally for African creative content. People, and there's not enough supply to meet demand. But we keep going to the same networks, the same angles to look for content. We need to actually grow the spy. We need to invite more people and make it a bit easier for people to get access. And like I say, for me, it's not shame.
Yeah.
It makes business sense, and it's just the most logical thing to do. Africa's we're the biggest continent in the world. It doesn't make sense that we're not at tables. So any conversation, animation, climate change, whatever, my mission is to put a spotlight on African talent and to make sure that we both have a voice at the table, but we're building tables that suit us, and that we're actually giving feedback to the world that actually you guys need to innovate more. If I look at a lot of hubs in Europe, heavily subsidized by government, heavily. We don't have that luxury in Africa. So we need to create viable business models. So by having Africa Hub founders in a conversation, that's already creating a sense of inclusion for global hub networks, and they can learn from the diversity that we're bringing in diversity in models that we're bringing to the conversation.
This idea of the need for African content, especially African stories in various places, more so within the animation or animated space. I'm seeing a rise in it now with the likes of Disney Plus and Netflix kind of adopting that and bringing it to the fore. How can digital play a role in that? Because again, by and large, what it needs is a platform, right? I mean, there are many comics or animators in South Africa that I've kind of seen doing African language content and putting it up on YouTube, for instance, and all of that. How can digital play a role in that? Or how can creatives almost use digital as a stepping stone to them being on bigger and better platforms?
Sure. I think firstly I'll say the gift of the pandemic. I think, the gift of the pandemic showed us that animation industries were growing and thriving during lockdown.
Yeah.
People were consuming content at a ridiculous fashion. There's also Cartoon Network. There's a whole lot of channels that are actively seeking our content because that's what consumers want. And the animators were actually happy to work at home because they could get more done. I think what few people know is that South Africa is one of the service work hotspots of animation in the world. So we're working on other people's productions and supporting them to win Emmys and even go to the Oscars.
Yeah.
Very few people know that. That's a talent coming directly from South Africa. Where I'm trying to get us is, yes, we can continue to do service workers, but we need far more people who are developing, again, IP comes up, original content. We've got our own mythology, we've got our own narratives, but we need to look at ownership. One of the problems with retaining local ownership is that we don't have sufficient local broadcasters to stream local content. So we're at the mercy of international broadcasters to exactly take our content to market. And then quite often that's at an imbalanced rate or fee, or we have to sell content.
Now, you are part of. I mean, you've mentioned that you've been part of and you're part of hubs, and you see hubs making an impact in a lot of these places. Outside of structures like Tshimologong and other formations, why, in your view, do we not come together more often to co-create solutions that benefit society? What's the hurdle?
No, I think even before I got into physical hubs and physical innovation
Yeah.
spaces, I mean, for me, universities are breeding grounds for innovation. Schools are. I would love us to invest more in student clubs. I remember when I studied at RAU, the Rand Afrikaanse Universiteit, that's not UJ. I needed to go make a case to the Dean of Students about why they should allow me to keep running ISEC and Toastmasters at that time. And you literally came with a business proposal, and it was rubbish, to be honest. It wasn't that, but to me, it was like so serious, such a serious pitch.
Yeah.
And it was an easy yes. Like in hindsight, it's an easy yes. But in that moment, that was entrepreneurial grit, just asking for that permission. And I think, we don't have to have big fancy things.
Yes.
We just, need to find, like, I'm interested in whatever topic. And it can be about food gardens or whatever. We're seeing the problem, there's not enough food locally. I'm seeing that as a local community member, just asking around who else is interested. I'll bring some buckets, what can you bring? It needs to start simple. My concern is that we've brought too much jargon into what we are doing, and then doesn't become accessible to people. Quite often people they are meeting, and maybe we're not naming it as innovation because it doesn't fit our lens.
Right. Yeah. So firstly, simplify it and look for people around you who can enable it. And I think I like this idea of the fact that there are people everywhere, that schools, varsity, wherever you are, there might be someone there. And it goes back to the point you were making about not just naming the elephant, but also being cognizant of the fact that we're probably trying to solve a similar problem and being vocal about the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah. And then there are probably a few principles I live with by now, even though they typical facilitation principles, I've started embodying it. We speak about empathy as a principle of design thinking. And now corporates have caught on to this a few years ago, but it's for the end goal monetization only. There's nothing wrong with monetization.
Sure.
My issue is that we cannot have empathy is not 8 to 5.
Yeah.
It's a practice. It's a way of living. It's a way of showing up in the world with empathy, with generosity, with openness. The practice of suspending judgment. If we learn to suspend judgment, it doesn't mean let go of your view. Just suspend it to listen. What is the next person saying? Because you just may pick up something that may enrich you. The idea of, for me, the law of 2 feet. If I find myself in a place that I can't make a contribution, and I don't feel valued, walking and leaving and going to a place where I can.
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, it's also holding an attitude of invitation. I'm always inviting people to things, the biggest, the smallest. My birthday party has become a thing now in Joburg, because I've been having something small every year for 20 years, and I get calls from November. What are you doing? I'm just I just dropped it on Facebook. People show up here. Sometimes I go extreme, but I think we all can just see where and how can we be a bit more open.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You spoke about diversity earlier, and I want to go back to that because we didn't unpack that idea. But so the thinking that comes up for me when you talk about diversity and inclusive innovation is, what role does diversity play in fostering creativity and innovation, as well as this inclusive innovation for us to collaborate at a large scale or on a large scale to solve societal problems?
Sure, and I think that word large scale says it all, because to be honest, diversity is hard. Mm-hmm. Diversity is annoying. It will be so much easier if I meet up with 4 people that went to the same school in the same neighborhood with me and we do something. Mm. We understand each other, we have the same dynamic, we're going to get things done super fast. But it's only going to stay either niche or in a very small segment of the market. But if you want to do something at scale, you need to expand that lens and get more views around the table. Mm. Get more insight, get more data, and inform the next step based on more of a broad-based opinion lens. But you can't sort of outsource diversity. It needs to be part of the way of working. I was looking at our team at Tshimologong this morning. Number one, I was very disappointed that a lot of the... I'm going off track now.
Yeah, sure.
But a lot of the born trees didn't understand the importance of women's door, what it meant.
Right.
And I said to them, I think we've also fallen into this way of thinking in Tshimologong where we take things for granted. We have a very diverse team, gender, racial, age, even sexual orientation. It's such a diverse team. And, every so often we'll get another hub calling us because they need to meet quotas on some or other segment in society. We haven't thought about that in years because at the nucleus, that's how we work. Mm. And it's when we do recruitment and selection. There is a lot of merit when we invite people onto a program or to be part of our team, but we also make sure that we hold some sort of balance when inviting people to join our team and to join our community of entrepreneurs.
There's something that came up in a conversation we had in one of our episodes where we're talking about this idea of diversity, and this of course was coming from an agency lens, an agency or business kind of perspective, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So we talk about diversity a lot, and in our talking about diversity, we usually, or at least diversity is usually referred to as some of the markers that you've just mentioned: race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, all of these things. And yet a lot of the time we don't almost recruit or bring people in based on the diversity of thinking that they bring to the table. How important is that, and how do you invite people in based on that as a marker?
Man, such a tough question. And you're asking someone who's not politically correct at all. And I think, for us, when we invite people to be part of our team, I think that is the culture shock they go through.
Mm. Yeah.
That we speak the spoke. We speak about everything. And it's not always, somebody is always going to feel uncomfortable of what's being said at the table. But that view is there. And I think, tension is good, tension is healthy. I think innovation is messy.
Sure.
It's sometimes borderline ugly, there's friction. But it's in that friction where you start, often think about refining something, everybody speaks about what does it take to create a diamond.
Yeah.
So I invite the friction.
Sure.
And the thing is, if you want transformative change, you need to go through the friction.
Yeah.
And through the conflict to truly listen what's on the other side. And then almost like fish for what are the gems that have come out from it in order to develop something new that's transformative. Post the conflict, like have a look at the conflict and say, okay, what were those elements of truth that are true to both of us or to all of us in the room that's sufficient to go forward. But I don't think we should be afraid of tension or conflict. And diversity is not about sameness. It's not, I'm losing English.
It's not about being agreeable all the time.
Exactly. Exactly. And even for me as the CEO of Tshimologong Precinct, gosh, my senior team members work on my bloody nerves.
Yeah.
All the time. We're always arguing. But the stuff that they're creating is so insane that we need to agree, like, what is this framework that we need to have alignment on?
Right.
And then you color in what you think is important for the rest. So there's some compromise, but we also know, like, these are the things we can agree on, and that's the framework, and then give people space to bring other stuff in.
If you're enjoying The Lead Creative, please share this episode with your network and hit follow or subscribe. Enjoy the show. So being clear about the things that you are willing and aren't willing to compromise on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what measures do you use? What measures or indicators do you use to evaluate the success of creative collaboration in your team, or in terms of whatever it is that you're trying to achieve?
I think and so funny, before I hopped on the call, myself and the COO were speaking about KPIs. And, we were debating, like, she was like, no, I'm not going to put a very specific number. It doesn't make sense because we're in an innovative environment.
Yes.
We may offshoot that, or the market shifts so fast that we may then not achieve that. I think for me, the framework needs to be just, clear enough. So whatever agency you work with, like maybe it is about, for the next year, this is the kind of client I want to onboard.
Right.
Sorry, I'm thinking, I'm making it up as I go along. But have a few key things, and not too many, 3 to 5 objectives you'd like to achieve over the next year.
Right.
And for me, I use it as a North Star, and I try to overshoot where I can. But the thing is, if you are in an innovative environment, it's experimental. You cannot be too fixed on the ultimate outcome you want to achieve. And for me, this is sometimes where we need to educate our clients to say, look, you want to be in an innovative environment is emergent. It wouldn't be emergent if you were so clear about the outcome, then it's not innovative. So I love working with steering committees. For me, that is a touch point where you and the client take shared responsibility for the outcome. As soon as the client just says, oh, it's on you, forget it. When something goes wrong, it's all your fault.
Right.
But if it is a conversation and you keep, set some milestones in place and review and look at where do we need to adapt. In entrepreneurship, we always speak about pivot. But they need to be in it with you. I've walked away from clients that wouldn't. I'll just give you one example. A client wants us to train learners with disabilities
yes.
that they're going to absorb into the corporate. But number one, they didn't speak to HR. So they're using their transformation money to pay us. Cool, grand. But they didn't align with the HR. So HR was like, what must I do with the people? And then thirdly, when I started asking, but what does your tech team need? The tech team gave very clear sets of future skills they need in their business. And they've communicated with HR. So I was like, guys, let's have HR as the main client because they'll already onboard HR. And then you use your transformation money to pay for it.
Yes.
All your objectives are met. But then it's all of us sitting around the table to do an evaluation every 3 months.
Yeah, because otherwise it gets lost in that haze of different people wanting different things, and you wanting to, of course, work alongside whatever it is that the objective was given. But actually, at the end, the people will come out of this training or come out of this process and not be absorbed as promised.
And creatives and developers always know the client never gives the full scope. They don't even understand how to frame a scope when, when inviting you. So never take full responsibility for the success of something. Really try to negotiate upfront that it is a partnership that you're entering into.
Now, for a question that I guess might be, I don't know if it might be a bit complex, but it's something that I've been wrestling with as a thought, and something that comes up quite a bit in these conversations that we have. And this is, how does the process of scaling affect the nature of collaboration? As you grow, how do you manage the changes that come with that growth?
Sure. I'm laughing because I'm in it. I'm in it. We've prototyped, and I often think about some of the first principles in the development world. You cannot go to another community without speaking to the chief and asking for permission to operate there. And I think for me, it's not just about arriving in a new place. And sometimes it's a physical location, sometimes it's just scaling in numbers. But every, I think, gateway of scale has its own set of stakeholders and gatekeepers, if you like. If anything, I'm a lobbyist.
Yeah, yeah,
I've never named myself as that. But conversations are key. And you need to, number one, not number one, some of the things you need, like I say, conversation with all the key stakeholders. I'm always doing stakeholder mapping to look at who needs to be part of this opportunity we're working with. Secondly, do we have the operational capabilities
yeah.
to do this work? Get that DNA down. Like once you've gotten the DNA down and the operation, the back-end operation, then it's easier to move. And again, for me, working with a bunch of creators at Tshimologong, my team doesn't want to do that. Our theme this year is building for resilience.
Yeah.
We cannot be a resilient, high-growth entity that scales beyond Joburg if we do not have the basics right. So that principle of writing down. I'll just give you another example. Our software, we sometimes have tension between our software development team and the maker team. Makers love to make, and they make on the fly, they look at the problem, they make the solution. But the thing is, when they're confronted with another similar problem, they have to remake from the start. And then we've got our software development community that uses engineering principles. They want to look at the entire system and system change before they start the work. And sometimes it takes forever, it's frustrating. And we try to get the two to meet in the middle. Make sure that you understand the problem, you get enough down,
Yeah.
and move and build as you go along, but document as you go along. Like I say, it's a blend of operation and making sure that you have a market understanding wherever you want to grow, and that you onboarding stakeholders in that place.
Now, Lesley, you've mentioned a lot from, I think, from appealing to people, emotionally, appealing to people's logic, finding stakeholders, collaborating with them, partnering, and of course, creating solutions that work, and being open and transparent about the process. Now, in closing, can you describe some key strategies, or talk through at least some key strategies to inspire others and inspire organizations in maintaining creativity at a large scale, and also, creativity at a large scale that enables change in society, positive change in society? Have you got some ideas, or at least some closing or sort of thoughts that can take us there, that can take organizations to that point?
Sure. What immediately comes to mind is often this people say don't be the smartest person in the room. Like literally, that is so true. Make sure you hire more people that know more about a subject than you. And and I think why that is such a difficult principle is because we are in this time in society where everybody wants to be a thought leader and the web influencer. So you want to be the key talent in the room and own that.
Sure.
I think number one, identify people you want to work with that know more than you sometimes of a subject matter and give them the limelight. I think part of the reason why Tshimologong grew so fast is that I've got a team of thought leaders.
Yeah.
And what is nice is I'm at that point where people don't necessarily want me in the room.
Yes.
Sometimes I'm like, I would have loved to go on that international. I wasn't invited, a team member was.
Yeah.
But you're only going to operate on scale if you've got a bunch of excellent people on your back. But as the leader within that situation, you need to give other people the glory. So I've been really working with my team to build their profile, the public brand, but also I've got a rule. If I didn't design something, don't quote me in the media. Because number one, it'll be embarrassing if people come to me and ask me a question I don't know. But scale is about people. Like creating a collaborative workspace is not hogging the limelight. There's room for us all. The same thing when growing partners around you. It's about constantly showcasing and celebrating the partners that are with you. We're at the point now with some of the partners where they've got sticky situations with their other suppliers. Sometimes they'll ask us to work with a supplier to improve that supplier's work, to unlock the door.
Yeah.
So now we're suddenly getting involved in policy and conflict resolution with other partners. We'll get paid for that piece of work, but it's not our project. Their supplier is going to benefit. But if we make that supplier look good, it's not about collecting brownie points, but they appreciate us and they will invite us into a similar situation in future. So your business model evolves, the way you show up evolves, but like literally it becomes that mindset of like, actually guys, there's room for us all. Mm-hmm. I think for me, if there's anything I want to say to people, there's room for us all. Showcase and celebrate other people and they'll appreciate you back. And that's how we grow and scale together.
Yeah, it's not often that we quote musicians, but basically make the circle bigger.
It's right? Just because I'm but it is. Yeah. And people like honesty. It's such, I know it sounds so 70s, but like literally people like honesty. And I know this isn't that 70s show, but people respond to it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lesley. That was amazing.
Thank you, Mo.
Thank you for listening to The Lead Creative. Did you get one insight that's worth sharing from this episode? Please share it with your network or your friends. Pop me some of your ideas and innovative finds on Twitter on @Mongezi. This podcast is available on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also find me on mongezi.com.